Okay, we're recording. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Rabbi Dr. Michael Harris, who is going to be blessing us with words of wisdom, philosophy, and Tachmod.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Gabriella. Good morning, everyone who's here, and morning to everyone who is joining us remotely. The title is I hope everyone's got sight of the sheet. Fine. Title: Lo Tachmod, Halacha and Philosophy. What we'll do is I'm going to make a few introductory points first. Then we'll go on to look at 4 halachic issues around Lo Tachmod, don't covet, don't be jealous, the last of the Aseret HaDibrot. And finally, we will look at a couple of one philosophical issue which arises from the existence of this mitzvah. Okay, so I've told you the structure now, because I know it's too early for me now, and then when I get lost, we'll know roughly where I am. Okay, so going through the source sheet, we have, of course, 2 places in the Torah in which the Aseret HaDibrot are given or listed. One in Sidra of Yitro, which of course we'll read, please God, on Friday morning, leaning for first day Shavuot, catch a new ole. Only day Shavuot. But God, once the Yitzif Pisgah, it's one of my favorites on Shavuot. You know, second day of Torah. You know what I'm talking? You too. Don't get that.
No.
They just yeah. Anyway, it's great to be. It's great to be. We read the Aseret HaDibrot, part of the laning, and at the end, the 10th of the 10 Commandments. Lo Tachmod beit re'echa. Don't covet or be jealous of your neighbor's house. Lo Tachmod eshet re'echa. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Or his servant, maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And then in the version of the Aseret HaDibrot, which we have in Parshat Va'etchanan, in Devarim chapter 5, we have wording which is similar in many ways, different in others. Lo Tachmod eshet re'echa, begin this time with telling men not to covet wives of other men. Lo titaveh beit re'echa, don't lust after or strongly desire the house of your neighbor. Sadehu, his field, and that same list as we had then in Shemot of servant, maidservant, animals, and anything that belongs to your neighbor. So, first thing to ask is why that there are 2 marked changes in the version of the Aseret, in the version of the 10th Dibur, which we get in Va'etchanan vis-a-vis the version in the formulation in Yitro. Namely, help me out here. What jumps out at you? What's different?
In first and not in second.
Other
way around.
Have a look. Eshet Recha is actually in both.
Is it not?
But the position is different. The position is different, though. Quite right there. The position is different because it's the first thing in Devarim. Anything else?
The field.
The field. Sadehu, very good. The field appears in Va'etchanan, not in Yitro. And one other thing.
Strength of desire.
Titaveh. Yeah. As well as Lo Tachmod, we have Lo Titaveh. Don't covet and don't lust after. Okay. So the obvious first question to ask is why these 2 differences. So a couple of answers to this question. Firstly, the Ramban in his commentary on Va'etchanan, Ramban says, the reason that the Torah includes the words tava, lusting after, is to tell us that this is included in the category of chemda. This is included in coveting. Because if someone has a strong desire to steal something from someone else, but he can't do so because his friend who's got the Porsche that he wants is stronger than him and he won't be able to get it from him. Or he's afraid of the kingdom or of the law of the police. He can't just take someone else's property without getting into trouble. Or says Ramban, he transgresses the prohibition of lo tachmod and lo titaveh. Even, in other words, even just by the mental act of strongly desiring what someone else has and wanting it for yourself, and you would use force or underhand means to get it if you could, even though you can't, that's already an abrogation, that's already breaking the commandment, that's already being over the love, that's already going against the mitzvah.
What if you just covet?
Fine, so we'll cut, good, excellent. Right, excellent. So that's the philosophical issue we'll come to, your end of the game there. And how can the Torah command us in the realm of emotion? Perhaps we've got no choice about it. So that's what we'll come back to. But Ramban says that's what Lo Titaveh is doing here. Lo Titaveh is here to tell us that kind of Devarim, the formulation of the 10th Dibur in Hanan is adding on to what we had in Yitro by telling us that it's not just following through with action, it's just having the desire is already something forbidden by the Torah. And it sounds as if, or I'm saying it's not that there's Lo Titaveh and Lo Tachmod, but one is that Lo Titaveh is part of Lo Tachmod, because he says, as he put it, Ramban, he says, so lust after is included in Lo Tachmod. Just the mental aspects is included in the prohibition. Okay, so that's Ramban's explanation of what Lo Titaveh is. Therefore, what about the field, which appears here in Devarim and not in Yitro? So Ramban says, "V'hosif b'chan sadehu," and the Torah adds here, "Sadehu is field lidrosh mashanu b'mechilta," in order to teach us what the rabbis, what Chazal derive in Mechilta halachic midrash to Shemot, namely, ima haprat mifurash b'nechasim hametaltelim, afeini ela nechasim metaltelim. Okay, so what we've got, the structure of the verses in the Torah giving us the 10th commandment are what's called klal ufratu klal. Namely, it starts off with the general principle, then it gives details, examples, and then it goes back to the klal, to the general. So lo tachmod beit re'echa, look at the Shemot verse, for example, don't covet your neighbor's house. And then we get specific examples, and then v'chol asher l're'echa. So we move from kind of specific examples to a general. So what's Sadehu doing there? So Ramban explains Kashiume b'Mishneh Torah Sadehu, when in the formulation of the 10th commandment in Devarim, the Torah adds the word Sadehu is field. Al kol chachma prat mifurash b'davar shu koneh makneh av kol davar shu koneh makneh. So what Ramban means is that had we only had the formulation in Yitro, or had we only had the formulation in Devarim without Sadehu, I might have thought that the prohibition against coveting someone else's property applies only to, someone have a go, how would you put all of the items except the field into one more general category? Portable, right? Great, excellent. Metaltally, cool. Yeah, they're things that they're all things that you can carry, all things that you can move,
Except for the Shor and Chamor.
Except the Shon Chamor, but the Shon Chamor at least, and the wife. I mean, but I mean, you could, right? But they are not kind of immovable in the same way in which real estate is immovable. Not karka. It was a big, distinction in many areas of halacha between metaltalin and karka, between movable property and fixed land. So Sadeu is there, explains Ramban, to tell us that the prohibition applies to fields as well, to land as well. So you can't cover, it's not just movable objects or things that could be moved with some difficulty, but it's things that can't be moved at all, fields and so on. So that's okay. So that's just by way of introduction. It explains the different formulations of the 10th commandment, the 10th Dibur, between Yitro and Va'echanan. Rambam has a different answer to the question, why does the Torah forbid lusting after titaveh as well? And Rambam in Hilchot Gzela V'Aveda says, Hatava mevi al yidei chimud. Because it's not that the Torah is forbidding lusting after as part of coveting, it's that there is a negative dynamic. It's a slippery slope. One thing leads to another. Hatava mevi al yidei chimud. The Torah forbids us to lust after what belongs to our friend because that will lead to chimud, to coveting. V'chimud mevi lidei gezer. And the coveting leads to theft, to action. So the Torah is trying to nip the negative emotions in the bud because they will lead to bad actions. Ultimately, what we're trying to stop is people forcibly taking things from each other, and therefore we want to stop them at the beginning of the mental process. Cut it out at source. That's what Rambam says. If the owners of the item don't want to sell, even though you offer them a lot of money, and you ask their friends, to mutual friends, to intercede on your behalf, ultimately, if you're so fixated on getting this object or this piece of land or this spouse that belongs to another person, you're going to come to commit an act of robbery. Shenema v'chamdu batim v'gaz. There's a pasuk which links the two together, coveting and stealing. V'imam du abalim b'fanav lahatzil mamonam u'manu ligzol yavo lidei shfichut damim. And Rambam says, things can get even worse. Suppose that the person whose object or spouse or whatever you're coveting puts up a fight, then if your lust and your passion is strong enough, you might even come to violence. Now, it won't just be robbery; it will be violence as well. Shvichut damim, killing. And how do I know this? Says Rambam. If you think I'm, Rambam's kind of saying implicitly, if you think I'm being too jumpy and too nervous, too cautious about this, just go and look in the Tanakh. Go and look in Tanakh, which is safe to say it's people in yeshiva because they won't do that. But other than exceptional places like Gush, but okay. But if you look in, so we won't. I just brought it here. We won't go through the whole thing because of time. But a very well-known story of King Achav, king of the Shomron, is married to Izebel, to Jezebel. But so I was wondering, why do Jewish people in Chutz La'aretz sometimes call their daughters Isabel? Isn't that a bit like Jezebel? So I was worried about this when I was preparing this. So what do? You Google it. And apparently Isabel is a version of Elizabeth. The letters mixed up a bit, a Spanish version of it. So it's got nothing to do with Jezebel. Elisheva. Isabel's Elisheva. So it's fine. It's fine. But Jezebel, I know she's got a bad press, and I have always been, so my parents, when I was 4 or 5, bought me a cartoon Bible book with the big stories from Tanakh in, and you give a kid at that age and sticks in, and I have to be terrified of Jezebel. She's really scary. And this story of Nabot is there, and she's saying, it's in Achad, eat your dinner. Why are you sulking? This is what we have in the story here, where Achab wants this vineyard of Nabot from Emet Yisrael up the road, and Naboth won't give it to him. And Jezebel says to Achav, are you the king or you're not the king? I'll sort it out for you. And she gets false witnesses to come and say that he blasphemed, and he is put to death. And Achav takes the field. So that is Rambam saying, look, this is all about. This started with Achav looking at this nice vineyard and saying, oh, I'd quite like to have that, and then it becomes an obsession. And then it leads to him trying to force the sale, and ultimately to causing the death of someone else. It's slippery slope. Okay, it's fine. So that's the kind of introductory points of why the Torah includes lo titaver as well as lo tachmod. Okay, so 4 halachic issues around lo tachmod. Firstly, is action required? In other words, we've already kind of got an answer to this question from Ramban, that you don't actually have to do anything to violate lo tachmod, you just have to have the strong feeling. But in general, what are the views of other authorities? Do you actually have to do something in order to violate the commandment of lo tachmod, or is it enough just to think? So unlike Rambam, back to Rambam again in the same chapter, Hilchot Gazela Baved in the Mishnah Torah, Rambam holds, unlike Ramban, that in order to violate lo tachmod, you actually have to do something. It just stays in your mind, then you haven't violated the commandment. So Rambam says, is everyone with me? The same page. One doesn't transgress this negative commandment, lo tachmod, until you take the object. You bring it about that you can actually take the object that you were coveting. Where do we learn this? We learn this from early on in Devarim, Vayetchanan, chapter 7, Vayetchanan or Akev. The Torah says lotach about idolatrous objects. Lotachmod kesef v'zahav alehem v'lakach talah. So Hashem says to the Jewish people, don't covet silver and gold of the peoples into whose land you're coming, and take them for yourselves. So, in other words, it's quite clear here that when we're talking about in this context, we mean Hashem is saying to the people, don't covet their gold and silver, and take it. So coveting which has action in it, or coveting which is followed through with action. So Rambam is saying, just as in the case of that verse telling the Israelites not to covet the gold and silver of the idolaters and take it, they're only going against what Hashem says if they actually take it. So similarly here, or as they say in Yeshivish, similarly over here, with in don't covet lo tachmod, you're only abrogating the mitzvah if you follow through, and you didn't just covet, but you took it, you stopped short of taking the object, then you haven't abrogated the mitzvah. How does and Rambam's source for this will actually the next source is the Mechilta Halachic Midrash, which is Rambam's source for this. You might say, well, how does Rambam know that? So you see in the Mechilta, the next source, that it brings exactly this teaching. Or lo tachmod kesef v'lakach talach mal halanat she'oseh maaseh al kanat she'oseh maaseh. Just as with the taking the property of gold, silver of the idolatrous nations, you have to actually do something to be able to abrogate the commandment. So here with lo tachmod as well, that's the source of the Rambam. Now I just deliberately glossed over momentarily the first 4 words in the Mechilta, or afilu chomed b'dibur. Even if, what happens if you didn't act on your covetous feelings, but you spoke? So you didn't just think, I want that Porsche of my neighbours. you say it. You say it. You didn't do anything, but you said it. So you're somewhere in between thinking and acting. So there is another that in between view, which you see trailed here in the Mechilta, and it's in the Chizkuni, one of the commentators on the famous commentator on the Torah, that speaking is enough to have abrogated the mitzvah. Ramban we saw says that you don't have to, thinking is enough to abrogate the mitzvah, and so does Ibn Ezra. So that's our next source, Ibn Ezra, on the first version of the Aseret HaDibrot in Yitro. This is a long piece in Ibn Ezra. We're talking about all the Aseret HaDibrot, and he says the last 5 of the 10 commandments of the Aseret HaDibrot are interpersonal. They're telling us not to do things which are harmful to another person. Whereas the first 5 are Ben Adam Makom. It's obviously where the 5th Kibbud Avein seems to fall somewhere in the middle, but famously Ben Adam Makom, Ben Adam Chaviro. Second 5 are about interpersonal relations. And Ibn Ezra says here there is a progression in the second 5 of the Aseret HaDibrot from the worst offense to the least bad offense. It's interesting. Varishon Hu Kasher says the first, in other words, the 6th, the first of the second set of 5. Lo tirtzach, don't murder. Shehu la'afrid neshama b'guf. That is, in other words, separating the body from the soul from the body. Killing, that obviously is the worst thing that one person can do to another. And then if you look at what comes after, prohibitions, the interpersonal prohibitions that come after Lo Tirtzach, you see that they are not directly, they're very damaging to another person, but they are not directly harming their body. So adultery, Lo Tinaf, okay. And afterwards taking money, which is very injurious to someone else, but it doesn't harm their body. So we're going from the from harming the body itself, taking life away, to taking something which is very precious to a person, spouse, to taking something hopefully slightly less precious, which is the money. And 9, false witness is speech. So you're not actually doing anything, but you spoke about someone else, and they can have very injurious practical consequences. Which I bolded here, and then says Ibn Ezra, there is coveting in the heart. And that's so, he said, and this is up to least serious because it's just with thought, but nevertheless, he says, that's the definition, says him. The definition of coveting is it's just something in your heart. It's just something in the mind, it's just something mental. It doesn't have to be followed through with speech or action in order to be what the Torah is forbidden. So Ibn Ezra, unlike Rambam, holds that you can abrogate the mitzvah of Lo Tachmod but through feelings alone. Okay, so that's the first halakhic issue. Do you need to do anything? Do you not need to do anything? And as with all halakhic issues, the answer is machloket. Always. Okay. So that's halakhic issue number 2. Payment. What happens if I cover my neighbour's Porsche and I am really obsessed with it and I drive him mad about it? I wouldn't dream of taking it without paying. I pay him for it. So have I done anything wrong or not? Is that abrogating Lo Tachmod or not? So Tosfot says, no, you haven't. You haven't done anything. You haven't abrogated Lo Tachmod if you have paid. Tosfot on Sanhedrin. So Tosfot's answering the question, and he says, Lo Tachmod, don't covet, implies that you didn't pay for it. But if you paid for the object, then there is no prohibition of coveting at all. You haven't done anything, or you paid for it because it's the obvious svara, the obvious rationale behind it is you pay something for someone, then they've agreed to the sale, they've taken the money.
So it's not just the offer to pay.
It's not just not just the offer to pay. You have to actually, if you've actually paid, then then there's no lotach. So the person has sometimes we say that in Halacha, even with a for sale, we say I wouldn't say Gamar and Markne, that once even if a person's forced to sell, once they receive the money, they come to terms with it. And sometimes we say that. So Tosfot says, which is probably the intuitive reaction of many of us to this question. No, if you paid for the object, then you haven't done anything wrong. However, Rambam, who was on, as it were, the lenient side on the last issue, because he said you don't contribute or Tachmod unless you actually do something. Rambam holds that even if you do pay for it, you can still violate lo Tachmod by doing that favorite Jewish pastime, being a nudnik. Because the Rambam says, Kol hachomed avdo amato or beito b'chilav shel chaviro. So someone who covets the servant or maidservant or house or utensils of his friend, or kol davar she'efshar she'nei mimenu, or anything else that he can buy from him. The hichbid alav b'rayim, and he presses on him. He's heavy on him with friends. He keeps sending people round to ask him. V'iftzibon entreats him until eventually the guy says, "All right, take it already." Even though he gives him good money for it, that such action is an infringement of the negative commandment, lo tachmod. So according to Rambam, even just pressing a person to sell is an abrogation of the mitzvah. Yes, we were talking about circumstance. A person really doesn't want to, and you press them and pressurize them, and that the Torah forbids, according to Rambam. Okay, that's issue number 2. Issue number 3. What about if what you are coveting is a mitzvah object? So it's not someone's Porsche, it's their lulav. You see, that's a fantastic lulav that you've got there. That's like really, wow, I wish I had one like that, etc. So is that okay? Is that permissible or not? So here I've cheated in one for the Encyclopedia Talmudic, which gives you the summary of and full, very comprehensive summary of almost any issue you want. Someone who covets a mitzvah object, like his friend's etrog to tefillin. I must tell you, this is one of my favorite Aliyah moments. The contents insurance guy came round to assess. We don't have that in the UK. In the UK, you just say what you think the stuff's worth, and if you've underestimated, it's tough. But here they send someone round, and he's looking at how much it. He says, "Do you have a Sefer Torah?" I said, "No." He said, "Do you have tefillin?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you have a Megillah?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And he sat it, and I just thought that was just fantastic, just fantastic. Anyway, so wanting someone's mitzvah object, Katbu Achronim she'avar b'lo tachmod. So the Achronim post-Shulchan Aruch authorities write that. Some write that is an abrogation of lo tachmod. One isn't allowed to covet that. Others incline towards permitting it, because you don't want the object, because you want the object. It's not a question of owning it or showing it off or using it like the Porsche. It is to fulfill a mitzvah with it. And what's wrong with that? So that's an interesting issue. Okay, and halachic issue number 4, Eshet Ish. Right. Yeah. How does coveting someone's wife work? So I know I'm speaking to a predominantly female audience, and you must be thinking. I was thinking while I was preparing this, how is a woman supposed to relate? So why does the Torah only talk to men on this issue? So that the best answer I've got, which may be rubbish, so I think the Rambam says somewhere that the Torah, to use an inappropriate football analogy, plays the percentages. And as it will do what works for most people. The Rambam says somewhere in the guide that not all the mitzvot of the Torah will be to the benefit of everybody all the time. You can't, even a divine legislative system can't account for every circumstance, for every person. There's going to be some, the laws of the Torah work for most people most of the time, but there are going to be circumstances in which somebody in some situation may find it not beneficial. Doesn't mean they don't have to observe it. Of course they have to observe it. It's not going to be beneficial all the time. So the best answer I've got to why the Torah is saying to men, don't covet someone else's wife, is that percentages that by and large men behave worse than women. It's like a generalization across all of history in all places. It's probably a safe generalization. Mentally, yeah. I mean, right. I mean, obviously, it will. This would apply to a woman as well. But I think maybe that's why. Maybe that's part of the reason why. Okay. Anyway, how does it work? I mean, what's the Torah forbidding when it says don't covet your friend's wife? So it's like the Tachmod, it summarizes for us the Rishonim, pre-Shulchan Aruch authorities, argue about the essence of the prohibition. What is the prohibition? Some say the prohibition is causing her husband to divorce her so that you can marry her. That's very underhand. So this is presumably on those who say you need an action to violate Lo Tachmod. What you would be doing would be acting in a very underhand way and trying to bring about the splitting up of this couple so that the man can marry the woman. Now, what pushes us to say that? We can't say the prohibition of Lo Tachmod is to take her, to get together with her while she's still married to her husband. That's forbidden already. That's the 7th commandment, not the 10th. Yeah, lots enough. You can't. We know about that already. We know that you can't have have a relationship with somebody else's wife, the wife of somebody else's husband. We know that already. So Lo Tachmod must be coming to tell us something else. And the something else it's coming to tell us, according to this view, is don't act in a way which is supposedly halachically okay. I said, they got they divorced. Now I'm not a Cohen. She's free to marry now. What's wrong? So there's no Lo Tachmod. You can't do that. You may have done it without violating Lot enough. You may have done it without violating the 7th commandment, but it's something which is absolutely forbidden. So that's the prohibition according to that view. V'yesh sovrim shelo tachmod ha'umu ba'ishet ish hu alakichata be'isur b'oda ishet ish. But some say that it is the prohibition is forming a relationship with the woman, taking her, as it were, while she's still a wife of someone else. So it is that, even though it's already covered in the 7th commandment, Lo Tinaf, we have this additional Lo Tachmod partly applies to this as well. And some say, what Lo Tachmod covers is building a relationship with a married woman without bringing about the divorce of the couple by doing things which are underhand, which will work, but she's still married. Here's an example. Let me make it clear. Yeah, husband's gone off somewhere, and you get a couple of aides to come along and say that the husband's died. No, and he has. So the husband's died, and then if that's believed, then you'll be able to marry her. But that is that is a violation of law Tachmod. So what it's got, in fact, it's also a violation of law Tinov. It's still a violation of the seventh commandment as well. So even according to this example, we still have to say that we've got a doubling up here, that it's two commandments talking about not behaving in this way. But it reminds us that there are those, like Ramban and Ibn Ezra, who would say that lo tachmod in the context of a married person is the same, is forbidden just to covet, just if it's a mental act, if there's nothing other than the thoughts, it's still a violation, like it is with all the other examples of law tachmod. Okay, so to sum up on the halachic issue of Eshet Ish, of coveting, the way the Torah frames it, speaking to a man coveting someone's wife, what the halachic issue is basically, what does this add to the seventh commandment, don't commit adultery? So some authorities say what it adds is what Lo Tachmod adds is the prohibition to split the couple up in a way which works halachically but is totally morally pernicious, like trying to bring about their divorce. That's what Lo Tachmod's there to cover. Yeah, someone who does that is not violating Lo Tinaf, they're not committing adultery. Others say that no, we just got both prohibitions, that it is referring to a woman who remains married. For example, one gives false testimony, gets others to give false testimony that the husband's died. So this is adultery as well, but it's also lo tachmod, it's coveting, and that's what the Torah's given two prohibitions. And the third option is to say that lo tachmod can be abrogated just in thought, just in thought, coveting another person's spouse, even without doing anything about it, which ties in with the view of Ramban and Ibn Ezra generally about lo tachmod, which we saw earlier. Right. Okay.
Much more destructive when it comes to Eshet Ish.
Yes.
There's much more destruction involved. It's almost a separate thing.
Yeah.
It's a person.
Yeah.
And if it's a marriage and if it's children,
sure,
and all the others, seems to be a different category.
Yeah, sure. It's a different order of magnitude in terms of the damage it can do. Yeah. Which is
That's why
and maybe that's a reason why in Devarim the Torah puts it first. Lo tachmod eshet. That's the first thing. Okay, thank you. Good, fine. So that's a few halachic issues. There are many more, and there are many more debates within the four issues we've looked at, just to get a taste. So finally, a philosophical issue, which you asked about before, Leah. What is the Torah doing, commanding? I mean, how can I control if I covet something belongs to my neighbor or not? Why is the Torah commanding us about that? So this issue is actually raised, firstly, more generally by Ibn Ezra here in the context of the Aseret HaDibrot. So we're on to page 3, final page. And Ibn Ezra is dealing with a slightly more general question. Can one sin? Can one do an Aveira just in thought, or can you do a mitzvah just by thinking? So that's broader than just jealousy. We'll come back to just jealousy in a minute, but in general, So Ibn Ezra says, of course you can. Many people think it's impossible to sin by thinking. And there's no reward and punishment. The Torah has no expectations of us regarding the thoughts of our hearts. But there are many pieces I can prove to you in an instant that that's not the case. I won't go on at length. I'll just show you a few pasukim. In Mishlei, Proverbs chapter 6, the heart thinking, coming up with thoughts of iniquity. You did well because it was in your heart. There was a good intention in your heart. To those Hashem likes those who are upright in their hearts. In Tzavim, Moshe says, "He karov elecha." You can hear Eitan Katz in the background. Here you go. Yeah, it's in your heart to do it. So the whole purpose of the mitzvot is to straighten our hearts, get us to think in the right way. And the whole existence of the categories of mazid and shogeg proves that mental acts are important in Halacha. So there's a difference, as there is in many legal systems, between doing something deliberately and doing something through negligence. Yeah, so famous mazid, shoot someone deliberately, shogeg, it was through negligence. So obviously very big differences in Halacha between the two, but the outcome was the same. The person is dead, whether you shot them deliberately or you shot them through negligence. So it's what's in the head that is important. So Ibn Ezra says, look, that's easy. So of course, in terms of how we think, the Torah has expectations of us. But what about emotions? So cover things in. What about emotions more narrow? So here we have a famous Ibn Ezra, Lo Tachmod. So on our issue of Lo Tachmod don't covet, Anashim Rabbi Mehu Azot HaMitzvah. Many people are astonished by this mitzvah. How can there be a person who wouldn't covet something beautiful? I mean, we all do that. We all see beautiful things, and it's natural to want them. Anything which is beautiful in one's sight. Says, I'll give you a mashal, give you a parable. It's a country bumpkin, ish kafri, a village, a man from a village who thinks right, straight thinking. And he sees a beautiful princess. So he's from the sticks. He's from Zichron or somewhere, and she's from a posh development in Mamilla or wherever. And he sees her and he thinks, oh wow, that I would really like to date this woman. If he is straight thinking, he won't covet her. He knows that he's got no chance. It's just not possible. Kacha, essentially, Ibn Ezra is very blunt here. He wants to sleep with her. Ibn Ezra doesn't pull his punches. That's really what he wants. But he's okay, even though it's such a powerful elemental drive, he's able to get on top of it because he knows it's totally unrealistic. Kacha kol maskil tzarich sheyida. Similarly, any intelligent person needs to understand. Ki shayafa, the beautiful woman, or mammon, or money, a lot of money. These are not dependent necessarily on a person's wisdom or knowledge. What Hashem gives you, which ties up, I think, with the end of Michal's. I just heard the end of Michal's share. She's saying at the end, all these gifts come from Hashem. Sometimes Hashem gives a nice portion to someone who hasn't had to work hard for it. Okay, so these things come from Hashem. I think Ibn Ezra is denying that often wealth or success in different forms can come through hard work, etc. But ultimately, these things are gifts from Hashem. And therefore, a person understands that it's completely inappropriate to be jealous of someone else's spouse or possessions or financial status. Sages says the famous Gemara in Moed Katan, Kafchet, children length of life and sustenance are not dependent on merits, they are dependent on mazal. Now, that is very interesting. That's a famous Gemara where Rava says, how come we have two wonderful sages, Rabbi and Rav Chisda? Rabbi had a short and very difficult life, and Rav Chisda had a long and wonderful life. And he says because length of life, kids, and financial status are dependent on mazal, which we would translate luck, but the right translation in context of the Gemara is astrological features, which is part of science, and it's stars. Hashem gives those things to be looked after by the stars. And obviously, there are natural processes, we would say nowadays, there are natural processes which mediate, and that's how Hashem set the world up. And it's not just the fact that Rabbi had a shorter life than Rav Chisda doesn't mean that Rabbi is any less deserving than Rav Chisda. These things are not under direct hashgacha pratit. Doesn't line up. Not yet another example of which doesn't adhere to the totally dominant hashgacha pratit. And anyway, that's get me started on that. But anyway, and actually, it's very. I'm struggling with this. This Gemara doesn't fit here, because we wanted a Gemara that says Hashem has given you your wealth and your spouse, so don't be jealous of someone else's. We don't want this. This is about luck. This is about must. This is about being through something, and it's not about spouses either. It's about wealth. So I'm not quite sure why Ibn Ezra brings in this Gemara here. But anyway. It's a kasha. Anyway, a sensible person will understand not to be covet what belongs to someone else. Since once he understands that Hashem has made his friend's wife forbidden to him, she should be even more elevated. He must look at her as even more out of reach than the village guy looks at the princess. Therefore, he should rejoice in his portion. Not to lust after what is his. Hashem didn't want to give it to him, etc. And trust in Hashem. You've got the portion you're supposed to have. You've got you've got everything that you're supposed to have, or you may not have everything you're supposed to have, but there is no point in coveting what someone else has got. So here Ibn Ezra is saying specifically about coveting, you control yourself. Control yourself. You can't. It's not yours. You can't have it. It's not how Hashem has set things up. And you can govern. You can get on top of it. Okay, and finally. Sefer Chinuch, medieval counting the mitzvot according to Rambam's count. There's no scholarly consensus as to who wrote it, but anyway, very important Sefer. So Sefer Chinuch says in a similar vein, how can a person get on top of what they lust and desire after? Let me just skip because of time. How can the Torah command us what we can't do? I can't help it. It seems if I'm jealous of somebody else for something that they've got. So he says, he's very severe on. So people who say that are stupid, wicked. It's a silly thing to say. Because a person does have the power to control their thoughts and their lusts to the extent that they want to. Or you can make yourself bring things close to you to want them. Person's heart is given over to them, and they can tilt it, they can turn it in any way they want. As we have control over our thoughts or our impulses, and he ends off, there is nothing better for a person than good and clear thought, because that's the beginning and end of all actions. And that's what the sages mean in Pirkei Avot, where they say lev tov, that a good heart is better than anything else. So Ibn Ezra, so Sefer Chinuch, like Ibn Ezra, but Sefer Chinuch widening it out to all emotions and thoughts, says we do have control over our thoughts and our emotions. May be very difficult, ultimately is within our power. Something that Rav Soloveitchik stresses again and again. Let me just bring it in my injury time on 1 minute into that. There's something in contemporary general philosophy which I think really illustrates how this might work. There's a famous position taken by a philosopher called Harry Frankfurt, who distinguishes between first order and second order desires. First order desire is what I want. Second order desire is what I want to want. So I want to eat an extra piece of cheesecake, but I want to want not to.
Not to.
I want to want not to. I want to not want to.
The second one's Ozempic. The second one is Ozempic.
The second one is
Ozempic.
Ozempic.
Yeah. What else?
Oh, okay.
Everybody knows here.
Second one. So and Gary Watson, I thought, says talk about values. So in other words, it's talk about second order desires and values. So I want an extra piece of cheesecake, but my value is for my health, and so my value is not to want it. So Harry Frankfurt suggests that by and large, people have control over their second order desires. I can reflect and I can decide what I want to want, what my values are. And even though I haven't always got control over my immediate desires, I've got control over the second order and what I want to want. That's the thing to work on. And that may be, what Ibn Ezra Sefer Chinuch are saying, that yes, wants legitimate and illegitimate come into all our minds, but the thing to do is try and take a step back to the wanting to want, where one has more control. So that's a few reflections on Tachmod. Quite some there.
So much. Thank you.